Some of the important parts of the cerebral cortex that we want to consider are shown here. So the important motor areas are the primary motor cortex, the premotor cortex, which is just anterior to that, Broca's area, and also the prefrontal cortex. So we're going to take a little more close look at those. For the sensory areas, we want to consider the primary somatosensory cortex, the gustatory cortex, the vestibular cortex, and Wernicke's area, as well as the primary visual auditory cortex and auditory cortex, as well as primary olfactory cortex. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit to look at each of these, and I'll try to write some of the most important functions of each of these. So you're not responsible for every single one. The first one is the primary motor cortex, and this is located at the precentral gyrus. Just anterior to that, we see the motor association area, and the motor association area is going to have several different areas to it. It has the premotor cortex, the frontal eye field, as well as the Broca's area. And Broca's area involves us actually creating language or speaking. And it's on the left hemisphere. And we're going to talk more about both the Wernicke's area as well as the Broca's area. The Wernicke's area is located in the posterior association area and also on the left hemisphere. So this is the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area. For the anterior association area, which you can see is the prefrontal cortex, the prefrontal cortex is something that really does not develop until we reach adulthood. So this is what explains why teenagers don't always make the best decisions. It's responsible for executive area of tissue management, of task management, working memory for object recall and spatial tasks, solving complex multitask problems, and processing emotions related to social interactions. So you could imagine, for example, this last one could be kind of problematic when you're younger, when you are trying to navigate your new world, perhaps going to college or late high school, and you are trying to process those emotions, relate them to other people, fit into your social circle, and things like that. Remember that the central sulcus is that shallow depression that's separating the anterior lobe, which is mostly motor, from all of the other lobes. And the other four lobes are going to be sensory. So as we move back just a little bit to look at the sensory areas here, I first want to point out what's called the primary somatosensory area. The prefix soma means body, and this is located in the post-central gyrus. A lot of times when it begins with primary, that means that it is the first destination of that signal. And then we're going to see association areas, which I like to think of them like almost a cloud storage drive, analogous to that. Back in my day, we used normal filing cabinets, but those really are kind of out of vogue. So now we use Google Cloud or OneDrive or all kinds of cool things like that, or you don't have to have paper. So the cloud storage drive would be kind of analogous to an association area. So primary memories that have been stored related to somatosensory, these would be things that you feel with various receptors that travel to the primary somatosensory area. So maybe you've felt something similar to that, and that memory is stored in your somatosensory association area. So that would be somatic sensation. The gustatory cortex is in the insula, and we hear gustation, we think taste. There's also an association area for that. It's just not shown. The vestibular cortex is also in the insula, and it would be for equilibrium or a balance. So a lot of this afferent information comes in from the inner ear. The primary visual cortex, again, since it has primary, it's going to be the first location where information for vision from the retina goes to the occipital lobe. Just like other senses, it has a visual association area for vision. And then finally, there's an auditory association area and a storage bank, the primary cortex. And actually, I reverse that. So the primary auditory cortex is the first location where information from the ear would go to. And the auditory association area would have memories of things that you've learned in the past, which may sound similar to what you were hearing at that time. And that's the function of hearing. So down here we have a section, a parasagittal section of the right cerebral hemisphere. And we can see a lot of the same things. We have the primary motor cortex in the precentral gyrus, the primary somatosensory cortex, which is in the post-central gyrus. The central sulcus is dividing the frontal and the parietal lobe. We have the somatosensory association area, occipital lobe, visual association area, primary visual cortex. Things that we've kind of already talked about right now. This is the primary olfactory cortex, which would be for smell. We couldn't see that from the other view that we had, but as you can see, that's kind of in the temporal lobe. Also at the frontal lobe, we have the motor association cortex with the premotor cortex and the frontal eye field. This is called the corpus callosum, which is white matter or axons that we'll be talking about coming up. It crosses both hemispheres. We have an anterior association area. And that pretty much does it for this slide.